Among numbered seats and glances that reveal more than words, a story of dignity unfolds at 10,000 meters high. When disdain meets grace, and a simple walk down the aisle of an airplane becomes an act of silent revolution, discover how a man transforms rejection into purpose. The constant sound of the airplane engines filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, each carrying their own stories, fears, and hopes. Among them was Samuel Brooks, a 42-year-old man whose life had already been marked by painful losses and unwavering faith. The son of a Baptist pastor from Alabama, Samuel had grown up learning that dignity does not lie in titles or possessions, but in how we treat others, even in the face of injustice. The premature death of his wife forced him to raise his daughter, Chloe, now a teenager, on his own, and every choice he made was guided by the desire to set an example for her. Samuel was not just a respected engineer. He was a man who carried in his heart the certainty that God always has a purpose, even when the world insists otherwise. On that day, Samuel was embarking on a transatlantic flight to London. The journey was not just another among many for him. It marked a new chapter, an important step in his career, and at the same time a spiritual milestone, the chance to honor his father's teachings, who always told him, "Son, never let bitterness dictate your choices. True victory is letting Christ shine in you." As he adjusted the briefcase with important documents and placed his small Bible in the pocket of his jacket, Samuel observed the passengers around him. Families excited about vacations, executives worried about spreadsheets, young people eager for adventures. The environment seemed ordinary until an unexpected gesture interrupted the normalcy of the moment. An elegant couple, Richard and Susan Whitmore, entered the cabin. He in an impeccable suit, she in a sober dress, both exuding airs of sophistication and authority. They walked to the row where Samuel was seated, but upon facing the prospect of having to share the space next to him, their expressions hardened. What could have been just another ordinary trip transformed, within seconds, into a scene fraught with tension. Sharp words were exchanged in low voices, but loud enough for other passengers to notice. Uncomfortable glances spread throughout the environment. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if each second was a silent test for all witnessing the scene. Some averted their eyes, others frowned in disapproval, but no one dared to intervene. Samuel, sitting in silence, felt his heart race. Old memories surfaced, situations where he had been treated as invisible, moments when he had endured humiliations for something he could never change. The pain was familiar, but this time, something inside him urged him to respond differently. Amidst the discomfort, a prayer emerged in his mind. "Lord, guide my actions. Let my response not be the result of my anger, but of your love." Then, calmly, Samuel stood up. Without raising his voice, without arguing, without even casting a challenging glance, he gathered his belongings and began to walk down the narrow aisle of the plane. The sound of his footsteps seemed to resonate louder than the aircraft's engines. Each gaze that followed carried a mix of curiosity, judgment, and silent admiration. That simple gesture, standing up and moving forward, carried immense symbolic weight. It was not an escape. It was not resignation. It was the conscious choice not to let the indignity of others steal his peace. The corridor, narrow and illuminated by the cabin's soft lights, had become the stage for something greater than a simple seat change. There, at that moment, Samuel represented every person who has ever been judged unfairly, every individual who has ever felt diminished, every heart that has been wounded by words and looks of disdain. But there was something no one on that airplane knew. Samuel's walk would not end just a few steps ahead. The destination awaiting him had the power to transform not only that journey, but also the way everyone perceived him, and most importantly, themselves. The silence among the passengers became a space for reflection. What began as an act of rejection was transforming into an invitation for everyone to look within themselves. Even Richard and Susan, who still remained motionless, started to feel the weight of their own choices. The scene, simple and silent, was laden with symbolism. The contrast between the arrogance of some and the serenity of another, between hostility and grace, created an almost palpable tension. And deep down, each person present intuited that they were witnessing something that would not easily fade from memory. For on that journey at 10,000 meters high, Samuel Brooks was not merely traversing an airplane corridor. He was writing, with his firm and silent steps, a story that would reveal the greatness found when we choose not to retaliate hate with hate, but instead respond with faith, dignity, and hope. Samuel moved down the corridor to the first-class cabin. His intention was not to create a spectacle, but to speak with the flight attendant who had noticed his discomfort minutes earlier and given him a compassionate look. The woman, middle-aged with kind eyes, welcomed him with a warm smile. "Sir, may I help you?" she asked discreetly. "I am facing an uncomfortable situation in my seat," Samuel replied in a calm voice. "I would like to know if there's a possibility of changing it." The flight attendant, who had witnessed the scene from a distance, nodded with understanding. "Let me check our availability," she said, consulting her tablet. After a few seconds, she looked up with a surprised expression. "Mr. Brooks, I see that your name is on our priority passenger list. The system indicates a seat upgrade authorized by our regional director." Samuel frowned, confused. He had not requested any upgrade, nor did he know any director of the airline. The flight attendant smiled again. "There is a note here. Apparently, your company made a special arrangement with us. You have a seat reserved in first class." While the flight attendant was speaking, a man approached. He was the chief commissioner, who extended his hand to Samuel. "Mr. Brooks, please forgive the confusion. You should have been directed to first class from the beginning. Please follow me." Bemused but keeping his composure, Samuel followed the commissioner. As he passed through the area where he had been previously, he noticed the astonished looks of the other passengers. Richard and Susan Whitmore seemed particularly stunned. The airplane's first class was a completely different environment. Spacious seats arranged in pairs, adjustable ambient lighting, and an atmosphere of tranquility. The commissioner led Samuel to a seat by the window. "Here you are, sir. Is there anything else we can do to make your journey more comfortable?" "No, thank you," Samuel replied, still processing the unexpected situation. "I'm fine as it is." As he settled in, Samuel noticed an envelope on the side table with his name on it. Intrigued, he opened it and found a letter. "Dear Mr. Brooks, this is our way of thanking you for the excellent presentation you gave at our engineering conference last month. Your work on sustainable infrastructures has inspired our entire team. We hope you accept this small token as a sign of our appreciation. Sincerely, the International Development Board." A slight smile formed on Samuel's lips. 3 weeks ago, he had been invited to speak at an international engineering conference, where he presented his project on adaptable infrastructures for regions prone to natural disasters. He never imagined his presentation would have such an impact. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Samuel gazed out the window at the clouds painting the evening sky. He thought of his daughter Chloe, who would surely find humor in this turn of events. "Dad, you always say God works in mysterious ways," she would often joke when unexpected situations arose. Chloe, at 16 years old, was the living image of her mother, determined, intelligent, and possessing an unwavering sense of justice. After his wife's passing, Samuel had promised to raise his daughter with solid values, showing her that true strength lies not in responding with hostility to adversity, but in maintaining dignity and kindness even in the face of injustice. The plane took off smoothly, and Samuel began reviewing the documents for the meeting he would have in London. It was an opportunity to expand his project to vulnerable communities on different continents, work that combined his technical expertise with his calling to help others. Approximately an hour after takeoff, as in-flight service began, Samuel noticed unusual activity. Richard Whitmore was walking down the first-class aisle, visibly uncomfortable, closely followed by a flight attendant. The man stopped beside Samuel's seat, hesitant. "Mr. Brooks," Richard began, his voice tense, "could I have a moment with you?" Samuel nodded calmly, indicating the empty seat next to him. Richard sat down, visibly tense. He hesitated, searching for words. "I would like to apologize for my inappropriate behavior at the beginning of the flight. There is no excuse for how I acted." Samuel observed the man in front of him. There was sincerity in his eyes, mixed with shame and confusion. "Mr. Whitmore, I accept your apology," Samuel replied. "We all make mistakes. What's important is to acknowledge them and grow from them." Richard seemed surprised by how easily Samuel accepted his apology. "The chief flight attendant informed me about who you are," Richard continued. "Your work in sustainable engineering saved thousands of lives on the southern coast after those devastating storms last year. My own sister lives in one of the communities benefiting from your dike project." Samuel smiled slightly. "I don't do this work for recognition, Mr. Whitmore. I believe our mission is to use our skills to serve others." Richard nodded, thoughtful. "Even so, please allow me to do something to make up for my rudeness. I'm going to London for a conference on investments in social technologies. Perhaps we can find ways to support your projects." The conversation continued for a few minutes, revealing that Richard was a partner in an investment fund focused on social impact initiatives. What began as a moment of discomfort was now transforming into an unexpected opportunity. When Richard got up to return to his seat, he extended his hand to Samuel. "Thank you for your generosity of spirit, Mr. Brooks. I hope we can turn this unfortunate start into something positive." Samuel shook the offered hand. "That's how we change the world, Mr. Whitmore, one encounter at a time." After Richard left, Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, grateful for how events unfolded. He thought about the irony of the situation. What started as a gesture of discrimination ended up turning into a potential partnership that could benefit entire communities. During the rest of the flight, Samuel alternated between work and moments of reflection. He thought about how he would tell this story to Chloe, teaching her that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is simply moving forward with dignity, without letting resentment define your actions. When the plane finally landed in London, Samuel gathered his things and prepared to disembark. As he passed by the area where Richard and Susan were seated, he noticed that the woman avoided his gaze, still uncomfortable with the situation, while Richard nodded respectfully. In the arrivals terminal, a surprise awaited Samuel. His daughter Chloe was there, widely smiling and holding a small sign saying, "Welcome to London, Super Dad." "Chloe," Samuel exclaimed, embracing his daughter tightly. "How are you here? I thought you were with your Aunt Marie." The teenager smiled, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Uncle James arranged everything. He said you deserved a surprise after all your hard work. We're going to spend the weekend exploring London before your big meeting on Monday." Samuel felt his heart overflow with gratitude. James, his late wife's brother, had always been a constant presence in their lives, especially after the loss they shared. As they walked out of the airport, Samuel noticed Richard Whitmore watching them from afar. The man hesitated for a moment before approaching. "Mr. Brooks, forgive me for interrupting," he said, "but I would like to invite you both for tea tomorrow. My wife and I would love to meet your daughter and talk more about your projects." Chloe looked curiously at the stranger, then at her father. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore," Samuel replied. "It would be a pleasure." As they moved away, Chloe asked, "Who was that man, Dad?" Samuel smiled, thinking of the best way to explain. "He is someone who reminded me of an important lesson today, dear. Sometimes when we choose to respond to hostility with grace, we open doors to transformation, not just for others, but also for ourselves." Chloe nodded, even if she didn't fully understand. Later, in their hotel room overlooking the Thames, Samuel recounted the entire story, watching the attentive look on his daughter's face as she processed every detail. "So, you just got up and left, without saying anything?" she asked, impressed. Sometimes, Chloe, silence communicates more than 1,000 words. I learned from your grandfather that our response to injustice reveals more about us than about those who mistreat us. That night, while Chloe slept, Samuel sat by the hotel window, contemplating the city lights. He thought about all the circumstances that had brought him there. The loss of his wife, years of hard work, the challenges of raising a daughter on his own, and now, that situation on the plane that could open doors to expanding his work. The next morning, Samuel and Chloe met the Whitmores for the promised tea. What began as a formal meeting transformed into a genuine conversation about projects, dreams, and possibilities. Susan Whitmore, initially reserved, eventually opened up by interacting with Chloe, captivated by the teenager's intelligence and maturity. By the end of the meeting, Richard presented a preliminary contract. His investment fund would finance Samuel's next major project, allowing his sustainable structures to reach vulnerable communities on 3 continents. As he signed the document, Samuel thought about how a moment of discrimination had turned into an opportunity to help thousands of people. That signature was not just a professional commitment, but a testament to how dignity and grace can open unexpected paths. "You know, Chloe," Samuel said as they returned to the hotel, "your grandfather used to say that God uses even our difficulties for purposes greater than we can imagine." The teenager smiled, holding her father's hand. "I think Grandpa would be very proud of you today, Dad." Samuel nodded, feeling a deep peace. Amidst the bustling foreign city, he understood that true victory did not lie in gaining status or proving his worth to others, but in remaining faithful to the principles that guided his life: faith, dignity, and the courage to turn challenges into opportunities for growth and service.